All right. Good afternoon. We are back, and not even COVID could keep us down. But good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Supply Chain Solutions Weekly Ship Show. Today is July 7th, 2022, and this is episode number 26 in our weekly educational series that keeps you informed of the changing market conditions as we strive to provide the hand-holding and attention to detail that our clients value in a time of global supply chain disruption and inflation. And as always, it is my pleasure to welcome back from his honeymoon my Ship Show co-host, Jason Brand, our Director of Business Development, who joins me each week on our show. And finally, my name is Anthony D'Ambrosio. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Supply Chain Solutions, the company that understands now more than ever that the flow of the information is as important as the flow of the freight. And lastly, we'd like to thank the extraordinary Vanessa Fry, our Director of Marketing, for producing today's show. So we have a great show today, folks, and I think it's going to garner a lot of interest, and I believe it's probably the number one thought on all businesses' minds these days. It's all about the looming recession. Specifically, how will the looming recession impact global supply chains? It's called bullwhip effect. But before we jump into today's program, let's just take a moment to pause and remember the people of Ukraine. Thank you, everyone. So supply chains are experiencing a massive bullwhip from the COVID economy and have built up massive inventory levels. A slowdown in consumer spending caused by inflation and a potential recession will have massive impact on freight demand and prolong an inventory drawdown. So as we look at the pandemic through the rearview mirror, the economy is shifting to a new phase. And while the United States is currently experiencing a supposed semblance of full employment after COVID-19, American consumers are incredibly stressed about the state of the economy, personal financial security, inflation, volatile stock markets, higher interest rates, out of control fuel and energy costs, and economic uncertainty, which is sapping any confidence that full employment, should offer. So for supply chains, the consumer pullback couldn't come at a worse time. The bullwhip effect has created a massive overstock of inventories and wreaked havoc on global supply chains as companies try to recover from the pandemic economy. Now, I'm not sure if many of you have heard of the term, but the bullwhip effect is a term used in supply chain circles to describe a scenario in which temporary surges in retail demand are magnified and exaggerated by upstream manufacturers and suppliers who rapidly increase production well beyond the level that can be supported by consumers. And eventually, retailers find themselves with more inventory than they can sell. And what started as a goods shortage ends up as a goods surplus. Now, big box retailers have responsive supply chains. I think it's important to note, and they can cancel orders quickly, but smaller importers tend to be slower in doing so. They may not have the supply chain networks to respond to inventory issues as fast as the big boxes do, the big box companies like Home Depot and Target and the like, but they also lack the leverage over their supplier networks to painlessly adjust orders up and down. So if you would allow me to provide a quick thumbnail sketch of the current market conditions and how they are affected because of the bullwhip effect. So respectively, the softness in container markets will have a big impact on trucking in July and August as the container slowdown hits North American ports, coupled with the current stalemate in the ILWU contract negotiations. And if you remember, Jason and I did a show in the beginning of the year about the 2022 container outlook. And we talked about waning consumer demand and the potential for inflation, which is now a reality. And if this were to happen, we could see a market correction of 30 to 40% in the fourth quarter of 2022. Now, I'm not saying that that's definitely going to happen, but we are starting to see some corrections in the market. So, for example, at this point in time, the trucking market continues to weaken. This became very concerning in mid-June, which is normally one of the hottest months in freight. And the national spot index, which is the 7-day rolling average, dropped from $2.07 a mile on June 1st to $1.96 a mile on June 20th, which is fairly significant. And LTL is more exposed to the industrial sector than truckload. And we are also hearing that shippers like manufacturers, retailers, CPGs, which are consumer packaging good companies, wholesalers, are seeing an acceleration in order cancellations and requests from customers to postpone deliveries. And there's also a scramble for temporary warehouse space. Existing inventory isn't selling at the expected prices, and it's forcing companies to find incremental square footage to house newly arriving inventory. And shippers have slowed down moving containers out of the ports, causing container dwell times to lengthen again. And people have a choice. Do they put fuel in their car? Do they feed their families? Or do they go out and they start ordering on Amazon or go buy those big screen TVs or buy vehicles? So we're in a real slippery slope right now. Now, the container spot rates continue to drop and should drop into negative year-over-year territory very soon. The ocean carriers, though, have far more pricing power than truckers do. And we don't expect ocean container rate surges. In fact, we expect the opposite as rates continue to fall. Do I think we're going to see, $2,000 40-foot container rates again pre-pandemic from, say, Hong Kong to LA? No, but I do think rates are going to continue to fall. Now, fuel costs still continue to be a major factor for anyone involved in freight movement. And when you think about it, diesel continues to surge higher and is within spitting distance, and I hate to use that analogy, of $6 a gallon on the national level. Okay, right now I think we're at like $5.85 a gallon. Now, keep in mind that diesel powers the industrial economy. Things like freight, farming, and construction all depend on diesel. And as the price of diesel surges, it hurts cash flow of companies across the economy and makes the Federal Reserve's job harder in tamping down inflation. And I personally believe, had the Fed not misjudged the situation and acted sooner, inflation may not have been as catastrophic as it currently is. Okay, so what can you do about that? I think for supply chain professionals, this is really a signal that they need to work to make their supply chains more agile. Agile supply chains are better able to match supply to demand in environments when demand is growing quickly, or as in the current situation, when it's falling quickly. I mean, we are really seeing demand fall big time. And one of the worst things a company can do when the world is tipping into a recession is to react too slowly. And I think the key process for matching supply to demand is the sales and operations planning process, the S&OP. But if companies are using order history to forecast demand, they will be stuck with too much inventory. And demand-driven companies that have visibility to demand at the point of sale, can sense downturns in demand much quicker. And you'd be surprised how many companies don't have that point of sale visibility, which is a great barometer in forecasting the ebb and flow of the demand. So companies that can spin their integrated business planning, their IBP processes more quickly, will be better positioned to deal with a downturn. Now, many companies do IBP on a monthly basis, and increasing numbers of companies are beginning to do this process on a weekly basis. And the longer the planning cycle, the more likely a company will get stuck with excess and obsolete inventory in a recession. That's why many companies are doing this integrated business planning process on a weekly basis, and they are not dragging it out, as I just mentioned. So I think what's important is daily IBP is beyond what many companies can do, though. Not everybody, there's a lot of great companies out there, but not every company is as sophisticated as the next one. But at an inflection point like this, where inflation is rampant because of some of the current policies as it relates to fossil fuels, some sort of daily planning is imperative. And when demand actually begins to falter significantly, a company must be prepared to respond, in my opinion. So a few weeks ago, before I came down with COVID, which is why we couldn't have our ship show last week, I visited one of our clients and I asked what their approach was after the 2008 recession. And I remember that recession, unfortunately, very vividly. And they explained that they had implemented a daily inventory planning meeting strategy on a daily basis. And the company told all of his suppliers to stop all shipments for 4 weeks until it had a chance to recalibrate its demand planning. And the company also moved quickly to resize their company by unfortunately laying off workers and slowing down production and shutting some factories, which is always unfortunate. And as a result of these actions, the company was able to come within 5% of its financial plan every quarter, even during the worst of that downturn back in 2008. Now, we're not advocating that companies should lay off their workers or things of that nature, but when recessions start to unfold and they start to get bad, tough decisions really need to be made. But as I was saying about that company's financial planning, that company's stock price, like many others, tumbled with that recession. So it's a double-edged sword. But following the recession, the company's fiscal discipline led to a much stronger stock performance than its peers, than its competitors. And in the long run, that company, ended up on solid footing. So let me just try to sum this all up. During a recession, cash is king. The cash conversion metrics becomes an increasingly important KPI for the global supply chain team. To be successful, a cash is king initiative needs to drive performance not only in global supply chain organizations, but across the sales and finance teams. And this end-to-end effort helps ensure that inventory turns. Okay, and because the worst thing you could do is have inventory just become stagnant and not turn. Okay, so in a recession, manufacturers have to be careful about the impact of slowing down payments to key suppliers. If you slow down how fast you pay them, their financial integrity may be impacted. And many global supply chains rely on Chinese suppliers and contract manufacturers. And anecdotally, China's industrial output slumped to 4.8% in May and 4.75% in June, which were its weakest readings in 17 years, which is a real red flag. But I think paying small suppliers more slowly in at-risk economies could tip them out of business. So I think every company has to, really gauge, what they're doing there. And I think nevertheless, though, in a recession, companies do have more to worry about than just demand. And companies do need to carefully monitor the financial health of their suppliers. And I think a looming recession is a good time for companies to review how quickly they can react to the risk created by its suppliers going out of business. And we're not saying that's going to happen, but it's something you really have to be prudent about and think about. And I think for freight markets and supply chains, it couldn't come at a worse time. So that's sort of where we're at, with this whole potential, looming recession, how it's going to, impact global supply chains, and this whole concept of the bullwhip effect. And we sort of had a quick show today. We're extremely happy everybody's able to tune back in, and I'm going to turn this back over to Vanessa and Jason in case there are some questions. Jason may have some comments. I know he's still getting his sea legs back under him from his honeymoon. But with that, we'll send it back to everyone.
Yeah, I can just say one quick comment. And honestly, Anthony, I think it's an excellent topic. Seriously, really excellent topic. And it's something that companies have to think about. And now that we've been in this situation for as long as we have been, and we've kind of normalized, we've got to set up new processes, specifically like that company you discussed that made the changes back in 2008. This should be closer to the norm right now. And if you think about, this whole effect going on, and then, we're still pretty reliant, a lot of companies we talk to, still pretty reliant on overseas suppliers. You're talking about an effect that you're making your purchases and there's a delay before they get to you. So your demand planning in this weird kind of unusual environment is also hindered by, when am I going to get my goods, right? And it's on that delay. So if you could, we've got a lot of partners right now. I would definitely recommend at least evaluating suppliers that are closer for the time being. It can help you a little bit go through those ebbs and flows. And for your demand planning, now you don't have that, almost unknown gap. Obviously, it's getting a little bit better, but with the ILWU, which I can't wait to discuss with you guys next week. But there's still uncertainty, and there's a lot of it. And now, guess what? We're coming up on peak season again. So I'm just going to shut up before I go down a rabbit hole. But Anthony, thank you so much for the show today.
No, thank you. Vanessa, back to you.
Yep, we have 2 questions. If you guys have any other questions, you can let me know in the chat box, or you can feel free to email Anthony and Jason. First of them, how does a recession in the US affect suppliers in different countries?
Jay, did you want to comment on that at all, or?
You should take that one. I'm thinking about it right now. It's yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jay. So essentially, it has a dramatic effect because as the consumer demand and the consumer confidence continues to wane, and people have to make hard choices. Kids are going to be, schools will be good. It's almost going to be time to send your kids back to school. I hate to say it, even though we're in July here. You have expenses for sending your children to school. We have higher gas prices, higher energy costs, higher food prices, and it's a real slippery slope. And, it's going to have a dramatic effect because I think a lot of companies, again, as they recalibrate their demand planning, they may not be ordering or importing it quite frequently as they used to. And we're seeing it right now with several of our clients where they're not ordering as much, and whatever inventory they have built up from this bullwhip effect, this excess of inventory, they just want to have that dwindle down and sort of get back to a just-in-time shipping situation. So I think it's going to have a dramatic effect. And this recession is not just here in the United States. My personal opinion in studying the emerging trends globally and geopolitically, because it affects supply chain and business development, I think we're going to see a ripple effect with this global recession, similar to 2008.
Awesome. Thank you so much. The other question is more of a request, actually. It says maybe a how-to webinar for some demand planning tips, question mark.
I
That
love
is a
that.
good
Great.
topic.
I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're gonna
Okay.
make some notes on that right now. We
Yeah.
can do that.
Let's
Um,
make that happen.
Can we get, uh, demand planning for different, obviously, industries is going to be different, right? And also kind of what your company is and where it fits in that chain. Anthony, we'll have to talk about this. We'll have to kind of discuss how we want to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We will make that happen. We love when we get requests on the ship show. This is tremendous, and we'll put our heads together now. I know that Jason is going to be leading the way next week on the FMR, the Freight Market Roundup, and he's also going to have a lot of important information about the ILWU negotiations, which is a real fly in the ointment right now. So definitely tune in. We want to apologize. I want to apologize for us missing our first ship show this year. Came down with COVID. I'm doing much better, but we want to thank everyone for tuning into the show. And I know that we're going to have a great program next week. So we appreciate everyone's loyalty.
Feel better, Anthony. Take care of yourself. Thank you so much, Anthony and Jason, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Make
Thanks,
it a great
everybody.
day, everyone.